economy. They think the tax cuts have done a world of good. They look at the GDP rates, and immigration is really the last thing they wanted to get into an argument about. What's interesting about the photos, Don, is that if any Republican is having an issue with the president's immigration policy, with the zero tolerance separations at the border, it's House Republicans more so than Senate Republicans. The House is going to be decided in battleground suburban districts where female voters are going to play an integral role in deciding this thing. They have been more apt to oppose President Trump, even though they tend to vote for Republicans for Congress. And so there's a lot of concern on the Republican side of the aisle in the House that this sort of issue could go sideways, that the videos and the audio are going viral, and that it's going to cost them a huge problem in the election if it doesn't just fade away, as some of these issues tend to do. And so that's what I found really interesting about the meeting, notwithstanding the fact that they have a meeting. And I was talking to Republicans after the meeting, and they said, look, the president focused on immigration for about 5 minutes. Then he spent the rest of it almost like a campaign rally, going down his list of wins on various issues. And there's not a lot of confidence that when they vote for this bill that is supposed to deal with this and the DACA issue, that he's not going to have changed his mind, and it's not going to come back to haunt them.
Dan, I just want to play this, and then I'm going to do something else. Just to play a little bit of this. Here, this is the audio we got from last night from ProPublica.
Bueno, aquí tenemos una orquesta.
Okay, and now put the president's tweet up for me, please. So there it is. Thank you, House GOP. And the photographs? What do you say, Dan?
You know, I'm a political scientist, and one of my jobs is supposed to be able to dispassionately analyze what's going on both in the United States in terms of foreign policy and in terms of international relations. And the simple fact is you can't hear audio like that and not have an emotional reaction to it, which I'm enough of an analyst to realize that that is exactly not what the House GOP wants. The weird thing, though, I guess I would dissent somewhat from what David Drucker said before me. It's probably true that the House GOP doesn't want to run on immigration, but we've seen stories in the last 24 hours suggesting that, in fact, the Trump people do, in fact, seem to want to run on this issue. I believe it was Corey Lewandowski who said that you don't get your base out just with good news, that you want to anger them somehow. Now, I tend to think that this is a miscalculation on their part. The reason that Trump did, won in 2016 was not just that his base was energized, but rather that Democrats were largely disaffected. I don't think they're going to be disaffected this time, and they're certainly not going to be disaffected after listening to that audio.
So I was going to ask you, I think I just gave unwittingly, the Democrats their campaign ad, because I guarantee you will see those pictures like that of the House members with the audio of those children under in campaign ads. Am I wrong about that?
No, I mean, there was a poll that came out, I believe, in Ohio last week that showed that most people who are going to be voting in the midterms, intend to cast their vote as a check on Donald Trump. Now, Ohio is a state that's been trending Republican, but if that's the sentiment in terms of the vote, then the Democrats will do very well there. And so you might actually wind up with a situation in which, a president overseeing an economy with less than 4% unemployment, that has not somehow managed to start new wars, is potentially trying to negotiate peace with North Korea, nonetheless gets wiped out because no one trusts him at this point.
I just wonder.
Look, I think it's important to note that Dan is right about this. The president and Republicans in Congress have different ideas about how to win in the midterms. The president believes in the culture war and all of those issues that he pressed in the presidential election. Congressional Republicans want to focus on more anodyne topics like the economy, things that they think are more unifying, and so you have a clash of strategies there.
Did you want to respond? to that? Because
I was just going to add that if you look at polling that came out yesterday, both from CNN and from Quinnipiac,
Republican support,
a majority of
58%, right?
a majority of Republicans support the policy at the border, and the questions phrased. Whatever characterized the policy slightly differently. One of them referred to asylum, one of them didn't. But in any case,
majority of Americans don't support it.
Majority of Americans do not, right? But that suggests that at least Trump is not incorrect in assessing that Republicans do seem to approve of what's going on at the border. Of course, you can't win this only through Republican vote. You can't win these midterm races only through Republican votes, particularly if you have alienated a lot of Republicans as well.
Yeah, Dan, did you want to get in? I wanted to read something from your piece, but if you want to get in or you want to respond after I read it. Okay, so your latest piece from Washington,
Just quickly,
you have this headline. You said Donald Trump is bad at negotiating, and that is literally the antithesis to what the president ran on. So respond. Why do you say that, and then respond to what you were going to say?
Well, basically, if you take a look at what Donald Trump has accomplished in terms of, as president, almost all of his accomplishments are based on the notion that he's been able to get the congressional GOP in line with him, and he's been able to essentially engage in executive branch actions, whether it's judiciary appointments or the tax bill, or now, at least from his perspective, this incredibly cruel immigration policy. But what he has failed to do is negotiate any kind of grand bargain with Democrats on any issue whatsoever. And he's also failed to negotiate any kind of grand bargain with almost every country in the world. The one possible exception is the North Korea summit that was held in Singapore, but there was nothing binding signed there. He hasn't managed to, exact new trade deals from Canada or Mexico in terms of NAFTA. He hasn't somehow rewritten the trade rules elsewhere. He's managed to have a cosmetic renegotiation of the Korea trade deal, and besides that, nothing. And the reason for that is very simple. If you are someone who has to negotiate with Donald Trump, why would you ever trust him? He can't credibly commit to anything, and essentially the way he negotiates is to insult you repeatedly, which of course makes it extremely difficult for you to make any kind of concession or any kind of compromise, because that hurts you in your own domestic base.
I think fundamentally the problem is that Trump doesn't seem to understand repeated play. Which is sort of a fundamental thing if you're negotiating deals. And that's why, he basically shafted a lot of his various business partners when he was running the Trump organization. These small businesses that he refused to pay, that despite having delivered on their services or products or what have you. He doesn't understand repeated play. He doesn't understand multilateralism, that sometimes it's not just about extracting concessions from the other side. It's about building coalitions. It's not a zero-sum game. There are mutual gains from trade, right? He doesn't understand all of the kind of fundamental things that are integral to deal-making, despite the fact that he calls himself the deal-maker-in-chief.
So, David, listen, we have seen the reporting that the president believes that taking on immigration is good for him. But you're reporting that senior Republicans are worried that separating their kids from parents, or at least you believe that, could cost them control of Congress. So for everyone involved, this is all about optics here?
Well, look, I think this is all about a difference of opinion. When I was talking to senior Republicans yesterday about this, and again today, the concern is that you have these pictures that have gone viral that are very emotional, and they're going to overshadow any argument anybody wants to have about immigration policy. And it's hard to remove the president out of this equation for obvious reasons. But if you take a look at Republicans beside the president, and there are some of those on the Hill that are arguing that you have to get tough at the border and you have to be willing to take steps like this, what Republicans worry about is that you cannot win the argument when you're separating children from their parents, and where the House is going to be contested in suburban battleground districts where the female vote is going to be primary. You're simply not going to win the argument. And that's what Republicans are worried about. The interesting thing, though, Don, and I think this is important here, when you look at the battle for the Senate, and I was talking to Senate Republican candidates today contesting in a lot of these red states where Democrats are vulnerable, they are sticking with the president because they look at the Republican electorate, they see support for the president and his immigration policies, and they're not doing what House Republicans are doing. They're not contesting the president on this. Yes, Senate Republicans are, but the ones on the ballot in these targeted states are not. And that's a very interesting split you're seeing that is based on the playing field for the midterms.
David, Dan, Catherine, thank you. I appreciate your time. When we come back, where in the world is Ivanka Trump? The first daughter still hasn't publicly spoken.